Hello, and welcome to Coffee and Comics. I am Todd A.
I'm Taylor Trask.
Good morning, Taylor.
Morning, Todd. It's a beautiful May. What is this, May 13th? I had to look at the day. Like, what day is it?
Me too. It is not here in Southern California. We've had this is the May grays, and so we've been having like 65-degree weather and marine layers all day. So it's,
wow.
Yeah, but it's actually kind of refreshing. I'm hoping to store it up for the summer, when it will be hotter. But yeah.
Well, you're going to be here next weekend. I mean,
I am.
Little tip for our listeners: I'm getting married in late June, and next weekend I'm going to. The idea of a bachelor party, like traditional bachelor weekend, kind of repulsed me, and I was just like, I don't know if I'm going to do anything. And my friend Brianna hit me up, and she goes, "Hey, you should probably do something." And it doesn't have to be traditional. It can just be a weekend of things that you really like, and just get a couple people together that you think will be, friendly and maybe. And so I'm just like, oh, Todd, Brianna, and I thought about a couple other people. I'm like, no, just the three of us. And you guys are coming in next weekend, and we're gonna have a lovely little time.
I'll just throw this out there. Deadpool opens next weekend as well.
Oh my God. Shame on me. I thought that was later in June for some weird reason. I didn't realize it was already upon us. Well, let me add that to the list as well.
I like that we're talking sort of behind the scenes stories, because I had this really scintillating one to tell you, which is, not so much for you, but for our listeners, which is I actually showered before doing this podcast today. I was like, what feels so weird about this Sunday morning? Oh, I'm nice and clean and like ready for the day as I sit down to do a podcast, which never happens.
Now I want to go back to old episodes and just imagine you sitting there like a dirty hobo, just
like Pigpen from Charlie Brown, just dust floating around me. I have a very tiny apartment, and it goes from like clean to cluttered and dusty instantly. It's like if I don't, I had a little band practice on Friday and came home and just threw my shit everywhere, and I have not put it up. And so it's like, you can't even get through my living room because it's so small. So,
yes. The bachelor life. I remember it well. It was very, very recently that I was in a similar situation. So
what are you drinking this morning, Taylor?
Well, this morning, Todd, I'm back to tried and true coffee. I think after weeks of tea and other unrelated things, I'm back to coffee. And I am once again drinking a blend from Switchback, which is a local roastery here in Colorado Springs. And it is the Golden Age Espresso, not to be confused with the Golden Age of Tech from our friends over at Scientology we were talking about before the show began. Sorry, I had to slip that in.
Honestly, as you said, Golden Age, that's the phrase that went through my head. See, we are truly at operating Thetan level 4 of Scientology watchers.
And it was funny too. I so wanted to say it when we were discussing it, because I'm like, oh God, we're having a Scientology, but I wanted to wait till we recorded. So yeah, it's one of their sort of signature blends. It's meant for an espresso machine, but you can put it in an AeroPress or a French press. Really just wonderful little blend. It's kind of a lighter roast too, which I've gotten really hooked to the light beans as of late. I don't know why. I think maybe it's a spring thing, but I've really been loving that. So yeah. What about you?
What makes an espresso roast versus not an espresso roast?
This is a technical question that I am not adept enough to answer. However, just based on the grind, I notice espresso grind has the aroma is much more apparent. I think the way it grinds is a lot smoother. So the water, you want some space in between the grinds, but not very many. You want to pack it in as much as possible so that you get that really thick kind of crema when it comes out the other side. So it allows for that a lot more. I think, when you grind beans that are meant for a French press, typically they are darker and they're a lot more fragile, I think. So the space in the water in the French press is a lot, you can move through a lot faster. So I think it's just meant more for the espresso machine itself, by the grind, the smell, the potency, all that good stuff.
We'll find out, or some listener will correct us.
Yeah,
I am not on the I'm not yet off my tea bender, so I am drinking more of that gunpowder green.
Yeah,
this should be my morning ritual, and then coffee should be my like afternoon ritual. But generally, it's just a lot of coffee.
Yeah, I've been. It's weird. In the last week or two, I've been drinking way more coffee just throughout the day than I ever had before, and I'm feeling it. But it's like it was an adjustment to go back.
Yeah. Well, it feels like it's been a while. Only in that last week, you did a very cool single shot episode with your friend Mike Marlowe.
Yeah.
Did I get that right? Okay.
Yeah, Mike and I sat together because it was going to be a one shot kind of released. I think. Just in an additional episode to last week, and we ended up just making it the main episode, which is totally fine. But yeah, it was great. He came in the studio. It always changes things up a little bit. For those who don't know, Todd and I are rarely ever in the same room when we do this, unfortunately. So we make do, and I think we do a pretty good job considering. But when somebody's in the studio with you, it's always a bit of a different dynamic.
It was a cool episode too. As I said to you in text as I was listening through it, I like the fact that you did a larger comics roundup and like a what are you reading kind of way. What should we be paying attention to with someone other than me?
Yeah,
that was a neat way to like flip it and get an outsider's perspective on what's out there and what we should be watching. And everyone should check out that episode. You also talked a bit about Infinity War with him, and we had done Infinity War the week before. When it came out, I've now seen Infinity War a second time. How about yourself? Are you still just on the one?
I want to. I kind of want a little bit more time to pass before I do, because I want to see it again in the theater before it leaves the big screen. I think there's a lot of visuals that really work well in the theater. And I just want to give it another go to see if I still have some of the same complaints as I did the first time. I've had a lot of time to think about it and suss it out. And I've actually gone back and rewatched a couple of the earlier Marvel movies. Yesterday I did Iron Man 1, 2, and 3 just in the background while I cleaned and worked, and was able to kind of re-ingest some of that.
What'd you think about 3? In conjunction with all of them.
Well, full disclosure, I'm somebody who loves Iron Man 2. That's actually my favorite of the 3. And a lot of people hate that one and think it's one of the worst Marvel movies. And I actually really like it. 3 is directed by Shane Black. So there's a difference in sensibility. But for what the story is, it works perfectly. And I don't know. I liked, it was clear that the third one is probably the last single movie we should ever get. We don't really need to see more of that. I mean, at the end, if you haven't seen it, Tony gets the arc reactor taken out of his chest, and he really becomes who he becomes Tony Stark. He even says it at the end. He's like, I am Iron Man. I don't need these tools and these gadgets and everything. I can my brain and my outlook on life is all that I really need. And that was a really cool way to end that arc of stories, where it begins in Iron Man 1 with him, cocky, thinking that he has to rely on all this tech and all these things and his money to do what he needs to do. And just ending with him as just a man, but a really capable man.
And in Iron Man 2, where he's literally being poisoned by the thing that made him.
Yeah.
No.
And I liked the. I'm one of those people too who really like the mix-up of the Mandarin. It's let's be honest. If you're gonna do the Mandarin in the comics version, it's such a weird foe for Iron Man to face. It's just like this guy who is completely tech oriented, and this other guy who has these magical mystic rings. I don't like that mashup at all. It feels out of place to me. And then to try to do that, it's the Iron Man Armored Adventures cartoon that came out a couple years ago tried to do it in a way that made sense, and they really did try it. It still felt a little odd, but that's probably the closest Mandarin you're going to get that doesn't feel racist or weird. And so just for the movie to try to do it, I was just like, At that juncture, if they were going to do it, they should have already done it. So I like that, Ben Kingsley was basically a red herring. And I like that's the only way it could really work, I think, in the modern context. Obadiah Stane and Whiplash and Justin Hammer, those are the villains that I think are most appropriate to play off Iron Man, because it's they're versions of him that are a little darker. Obadiah Stane is what Tony Stark would have been if he hadn't gotten captured and gone through all of that, and Justin Hammer is what Tony Stark would have been if he wasn't as smart. or as charming. And it's just like, it shows you these aspects of his personality that he has to fight against and kind of conquer. And so the Mandarin just isn't that. It's not supposed to be that. And there was kind of a twist at the end where, and again, if you haven't seen Iron Man 3, what the hell's wrong with you? Like, don't even listen to the show.
I really enjoyed Iron Man 3 at the time, but it is the one I've seen only once, I think. So,
wow. It definitely deserves another rewatch. My only problem with it when it came out was that it should have been freaking released at Christmas, because it was a Christmas themed movie that came out in May. So that just felt really disjointed. And I'm like, this would have felt really, really good released in November instead of Thor: The Dark World or whatever it was that came out that year. So just that was my only complaint. Thematically watching it, you're like, this is a Christmas movie. It takes place during Christmas. It's got Shane Black Christmas songs, and they should have just gone all the way. And anyway, well, but we're not here to talk about that.
I bring that up because my pick of the week continued. So I saw Avengers this week, and then I revisited an old Avengers comic and wanted to talk about that. So we are going to keep talking about Avengers in a way.
Excellent.
Which is I read the Unworthy Thor Volume 1.
Oh wow!
Which is it's just a year old, and in the Thor universe, a few years ago, Thor, the blonde dude, the pirate angel, was no longer worthy to pick up Mjolnir, his hammer, and it was picked up by this mysterious person. A woman, and they kept that mystery up for maybe 2 issues before we realized it was Jane Foster. But I don't think Odinson, as he began to call himself, was. I think it took him a while to figure out that it was Jane. Maybe he never did. I'm not really sure. I haven't finished reading that comic.
Well, he did. He does. Just full disclosure.
So they had her take over the Mighty Thor. So for the past 2 or 3 years, the Mighty Thor comic book has been Jane, and they ran his stories in the Unworthy Thor. And so this one, I remember when I read it last summer. First of all, the art by Olivier Coipel or Copiel or something, Coipel, is just awesome. Like, this is like the art I want to see on a Thor book. And it when I read it before Ragnarok came out, I sort of saw some things that I'd seen in the trailer, like, oh, okay, so his hair is short in this book, and things that I knew were going to happen in the new Thor movie. But it really works with all these recent Avengers movies. Mm-hmm. And so what I did was I made a short list of why you want to read The Unworthy Thor. I may just bring it to Denver to hand off to you, actually.
Okay.
And it is, and then I thought I could tell you the plot, briefly after that. But so the hair cutting is actually a scene in it, which is pretty cool. Just as they obviously knew that was going to happen in the movie, and it was a nod to the movie or vice versa.
Does it happen the same way that it does?
No, it does not. Thanos and the Black Order appear in this. The Collector is the main villain.
What? Not Thanos?
Nope. And then Hela appears at the end. I assume she is probably a big part of Volume 2. And she may play the role that you wanted her to play in the movie Infinity War.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. She appears to Thanos and basically makes him the deal that you have talked about. And I don't know if we should talk about that now, or if people should just go back and listen to every podcast we've ever made and try to figure out what I'm alluding to. Yeah, he fights with an axe because Mjolnir is obviously in Jane's hands.
Do they call it Stormbreaker?
No, you know what? I had not it had never fastened in my memory was that Stormbreaker is actually the name of the hammer of Beta Ray Bill.
Oh, weird. Okay.
And Beta Ray Bill is this alien that sort of has the powers of Thor.
He looks like a horse. It's the one every time you see horse Thor, that's not a mutated Thor. That's just another guy who's called Beta Ray Bill.
Yes, exactly. And that's like when when people bitch about changing genders or ethnicities of superheroes, my response is always, when I was a kid, Thor was a horse and Captain Marvel was a black woman. I don't like this idea that like there's some canon and everything has to be a white dude all the time is so stupid.
Or that's like, or somehow that's like a newer phenomenon. Like this is only in the last 3 years.
Political correctness and SJWs or whatever. No, this is how we tell mythological stories, Mm-hmm. So yeah. So speaking of Stormbreaker, it is in this comic because Beta Ray Bill shows up and offers it to Odinson because he wants him to have a hammer. And the last point on my why you want to read this is that Thor has lost an arm.
I see that. I'm teasing the art up while you talk about it. I was going to ask you about that. He's got like an android arm.
It is an Uru metal arm, just like Mjolnir's axe.
Oh, okay.
And I believe I know I've read the origin of his arm. I kind of want to say it came from the same dwarf forge, on Nevada Leader.
Run by Peter Dinklage.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's those are my bullet points. I mean, I think having the Collector as the villain and Thanos as like a side villain is, given what we've seen now in Ragnarok and Infinity War and some of the Guardians like appearances of Collector, like, in the movies. I mean, this you got to be into this now. It is to me, it's just a cool adventure story for Thor. As I've mentioned before, I never like when like an actual or a different kind of myth is sort of pulled into a superhero universe, or like, gods walk among, human beings in superhero universes. That's always weird to me, but I do like seeing Thor out in space being Thor. That's the other thing. He's like in space, it's not, this is not on Earth or anything like that. So, so the plot of this, is, it just opens up with him going to town on some trolls in a fighting way, not a.
Has he lost Mjolnir at the beginning? Or is
yes. Okay. It is sort of like post the events of Mighty Thor 1. So Jane is Thor now.
Got it. Okay.
And so he is Odinson fighting these trolls with his battle axe, and his sidekick is his flying goat, Tooth Gnasher. Is giant flying goat. And so then he is how does he end up with? Yeah, I think he meets Beta Ray Bill first. I don't remember the order.
Now in this canon, do they know each other already?
Oh yeah. This is totally canon. Yeah, it's all this is like in line with everything. They're they feel they call each other brother.
Okay. And has he been like exiled from Asgard, or is he just so shamed that he just leaves on his own accord to go fight
Odinson?
Yeah.
He something's gone down in Asgard, and I cannot remember what, or if I even ever knew, but I know in the events of Thor, the goddess of thunder, and then the mighty Thor, that was sort of alluded to. So like I think that people have left Asgard. But anyway, so he is abducted by the Collector, and boy, I wish I knew the order of this. Asgard is no longer in Asgard, and he is abducted by the Collector, and what we discover is that the Collector, a Mjolnir, a different hammer, actually it's not Mjolnir, a different hammer that is has the engraving like whoever is worthy shall be able to lift this and inherit the powers of Thor. That hammer has landed on Asgard, and the Collector has tried to collect it, but if like a lesser being touches it, it just kills them. He points out like it doesn't matter if they're a robot or organic. If they touch this hammer, they're dead. And because he's an eternal, it doesn't kill him, but it hurts him a whole bunch. So because he could not take the hammer from Asgard, he has taken Asgard.
Oh, and wow.
It doesn't like totally dovetail with the events of Ragnarok and stuff, but it's that same feeling of like the Asgard, the place is sort of a flat Earth, if you will. It's like a floating sort of landmass in space that is now within the Collector's gigantic sort of planet-sized ship.
His menagerie.
Yeah, it's in his menagerie. Exactly. I forgot one of the other points why you want to read this, which is that Thor's other new sidekick is a Hound of Hell. And so there's this angry dog that can speak and only talks about murder. It's pretty awesome. And he breathes fire. So Thor's put in the menagerie, and the idea is like they chain him up and he'll break the chains, and they'll chain him up again with more chains and he'll break those eventually, but they're just keeping him there until he can actually lift this hammer. From there, it's you sort of sense that the plot is that Thor eventually is going to do whatever it is to lift this hammer. He's going to break through that wall of unworthiness or something like that. Mm-hmm. And so they do a couple of great like flashback scenes where a different illustrator draws it and the color is slightly different. I love that. To tie it back to when he was young Thor and would spend all night trying to lift Mjolnir, and his mother coming in to scold him and like, get some bed, you'll eventually be worthy. You're just not worthy now. And he just puts it up to like, I guess I just have to slay more dragons and save more towns and blah, blah, blah. And so he's kind of flashing back to that while he's in this jail cell with this hellhound. It's just, it's a good Thor adventure, And so then, of course, Thanos and the Black Order get involved because Thanos sends Proxima Midnight and the Black Swan to take the hammer. And they're being guided by this sort of mysterious being that can sense the hammer. So it's sort of like the person that's like on the scent of it. Mm-hmm. And so that person originally leads them to the wrong hammer, which is Beta Ray Bill's, and then realizes their mistake and finds the other hammer is, with the Collector. And so everything about this was so cool. And especially in context of what we've just seen in Infinity War and Ragnarok. And I just love this art. Like this is everything, I love about superhero comic art. It's pretty dark at times. A lot of like, it's just like they're muted tones, I guess. And really detailed in that way where it's not, it doesn't look digital, it may be, but it looks very much like these are thin pencil and pen lines. And it's just really fun. It's not like you have to connect it to the other stuff. We kind of talked about this with a couple weeks ago when we talked about the Fairyland, but I can't remember what is it just called Fairyland? I hate Fairyland. Yeah. And how you could, there are sort of like not exactly a cliffhanger. There's something at the end that hints at what will be in the next volume, but it's, you don't feel like I've got to read that for this story to make sense. You really feel like this concludes at the end. This was an adventure of Thor's and it concludes, and there's something there that entices you to read on, but you don't, nothing is unresolved. So I really liked it for just being like a, sit down in the afternoon and read through it. And just
is, you said volume 1, is there's just the one trade paperback, I assume?
No, I believe they've got several. I believe they've been running this series in tandem with Jane as the Mighty Thor.
Oh, I see. But you mean like this particular story has a starting and an end point, and then he goes on to some other adventure somewhere else.
Yeah, I think there is an Unworthy Thor volume 2.
But it's a totally separate,
like a trade paperback
story arc, different, completely everything. Like,
it's pretty clear where it picks up at the end. I mentioned Hela, and she does not play a big role in this, but you do feel like that's where it's going at the end. Mm-hmm. I should just spoil that. It's not a spoiler from the book, but Taylor you had thought that we might see Hela go from Ragnarok into Infinity War and play the role of Death, that a persona named Death plays in Infinity Gauntlet. the comic.
Or just right? I mean, usually any depiction of Thanos has him chasing and lusting after death. She kind of appears in a form that never talks to him or never speaks. And because we've never seen that introduced at all in the MCU, I thought, well, why not have Cate Blanchett just be that foil for him? And maybe because she has died in Ragnarok, that maybe she appears but she's silent for some reason.
Right. Hela appears and tells Thanos, "I'm here because I can offer you what you've always wanted." And he says, "Oh, what's that?" And she whispers, "Death."
Oh, wow.
It ends on a very passionate kiss between them.
Oh, interesting.
And
okay. For that, I need to read that. I'm looking at the art too, though, and like I agree, it looks stellar, and more importantly, it actually makes the Collector look like an actual intimidating character. It gives him some gravity, and it gives him some There's one page I'm looking at. It's got Thor kind of, it looks like it's a double fold, or it appears that way, but Thor's walking triumphantly with lightning, and he's going to face the Collector, and the Collector is looking at him with this really menacing face and just sort of flames around him, and it looks badass. And Telenir Tavon, how do you, whatever his real name is.
Oh, geez, I have no idea.
Every time they portray him in in the MCU, it's Benicio del Toro, who's doing a great job, but he's very much a sort of sideline character, not really that menacing. They steal a lot of his agency. He's just literally like an actual antiques dealer, of the MCU. And in some of the cartoons, they give him more power, but he's not a menacing kind of character. So I'm really interested to see how that plays out in this.
Well, you don't think about it, but especially because of the way they've portrayed him in the movies, but he is an Eternal. So he is one of those, like Adam Warlock kind of characters, I guess, that, is almost godlike. And actually, I just realized that I may have misspoken entirely here. This was apparently not an ongoing series that continued to run during the Mighty Thor. This looks like a one-off. It looks like there were 5 issues that they've put into a trade paperback. That honestly makes me like it even more.
Yeah,
that it ends with that promise between Hela and Thanos. Yet that will be, maybe that's picked up on in the Mighty Thor, but it's not here.
Yeah.
So like I said, that makes me like this and recommend it even more, because you can pick up a one-shot of a great space adventure with Thor and Beta Ray Bill, and it's gonna tie into the Jane Foster Thor, and feel good about everything. So
once again, who wrote it and who drew it?
So Jason Aaron wrote it, and this is me. I'm the Ben Kissel of this podcast. I never do any research before I read this. But I know Jason Aaron was writing Mighty Thor.
Okay.
And Olivier Coipel or Koppel, it's Coipel, is the artist. And it looks very, very similar to all the Goddess of Thunder, Mighty Thor stuff with Jane Foster. So I would not be surprised to learn this is the same writer, artist team as all the Mighty Thor. But I know Jason Aaron's on Mighty Thor. I don't know if Olivier was. So
got it. Cool.
Yeah. So what about you? What did you pick this week?
Well, this is a pick I never thought I would do on the show, and it's something that I have flirted with reading for a while. And you'll probably guess it before I say it, but it's by Jonathan Hickman. And it's a Jonathan Hickman title that a lot of people really like. And for those of you who don't know, I am in the bag for most Hickman stuff, especially his image/indie titles. Like, he can do no wrong. But there was one book that I'd always kind of looked at I just never could get into it. And largely it was the art, but also just the concept just seemed strange to me. And I'm like, there's other books that do it better. And lo and behold, Comixology had volumes 1, 2, and 3, the trade paperbacks available. Whoa. And I still had my Comixology trial. So I'm like, well, what the hell? I'll grab it. No commitment. I didn't feel like I was blowing $15 to maybe be disappointed. And it's the Manhattan Projects. And it's, again, written by Jonathan Hickman with art by Nick Pitara, or Pitera. Again, I don't know the exact pronunciation. I'll say Nick Pitera. And published by Image. And I'm up to volume 3 in my reading, but I'm going to talk more about volume 1 because I don't really have to spoil a whole lot, and I can get into it. And let me start by, let me address the art first. One of the reasons I didn't quite get into it is because it has that sort of very, loose, kind of wavy pencil style that I just traditionally have never been a fan of. It just kind of feels very, it almost looks like you're looking at it through a fever dream. Like it just kind of all move. It has like kind of a flowy fluidness to it that when we're talking about a story set in the late 40s, early 50s, I just thought, well, that's an odd choice. It seems like, again, we've talked in previous episodes that I kind of am one of those people that the tone and style of the art should fit the era largely. The Before Watchmen title that deals with the Minutemen really, really nails this. And so I kind of thought, well, it should be like that. Once I got into the story, though, it really doesn't need to be anything like that. And the story's so batshit crazy and just completely like it is not based in any reality at all. It's so heightened. It's so extreme that the art can just be whatever it wants to be. But what really kind of turned the corner for me was the realization that I'm really interested in another series called Citizen Jack, which came out on Image a couple years ago. And it's an amazing series, although given the election of Donald Trump to the presidency, it's a little too real. And I think the creators actually stopped making it because Trump got elected and they're just like, oh shit, what we're doing is actually coming true. So we want to stop that. But the art in Citizen Jack is very, very similar to the art in Manhattan Projects. Different artists, as far as I can tell, but it is very similar. And I had no problem with Citizen Jack. So I thought, well, shoot, that's one reason to try it. And the other one is, as I was looking through it, just kind of perusing, a lot of the wide shots where you see, it's not close-ups, a lot of just, the regular action wide shots or just, big kind of group wide shots looks very, very similar to the art of Where's Waldo. And it never really hit me until then. I'm just like, oh, that, you know what? Just for that alone, I'm going to give this a shot. So I've gotten through it, and clearly I'm on volume 3, so it's compelling. And I'm very slowly being warmed to it. Like more and more stuff happens. It's so batshit, and it just kind of seems like it's an earlier Hickman title. So it's been fun to see certain ideas and certain statements he's tried to make then materialize in other books since in a much more interesting, profound way. Like there's a lot of the Black Monday murders kind of gets teed up just idea wise in Manhattan Project. So it's kind of fun to see that happen. But to give you kind of a breakdown of the story, this takes place at the very tail end of World War II, in the Manhattan Project itself, which is originally, to us in the real world was created to, as we know, build an atomic bomb to end the war. That in this story is just the cover. That's, like we tell everybody that that's what we're doing. We tell the government that's what we're doing. But really what we're doing is assembling all these scientific minds to just go crazy and do whatever we want. And it's the military industrial complex on steroids. It's like, we're not accountable to anybody. We've got all these scientists around. We're just going to make cool shit and do crazy things and try to destroy aliens. And we've got our own initiative, but we're going to tell people we're building a bomb because, we need something we need a reason to get money. And you realize pretty quickly that there's no oversight on this organization. At some point, they actually make a deal with Russia to basically partner with their scientists because they're like, why are we fighting each other? We can accomplish so much more if we partner together. We'll tell our governments that we're at war so that they keep funding us, but we'll be secretly working together.
So they're no longer at that point, like just to make this clear to myself, they're not. They've gone rogue. Like they're not working in government in that sense. They're still
recognized. They're still getting funding from the government, but they're not answering to the government at all. It starts with, FDR gives them the go ahead to do this. And it's funny because at one point, and these are sort of spoilers, but not really, because you kind of need to get the world created for you in this first volume to then take it on into the next volumes. That's when it really gets interesting. But a lot of the volume one's really just a bunch of setup. And so right at the end of the war, they, one of the first things they do is they go over to Nazi Germany and take all the scientists they can get their hands on and bring them back here. So Project Paperclip or Operation Paperclip is referenced. And that's how we actually meet Werner von Braun, who he starts off as kind of like the asshole, swaggering, kind of like the comedian character.
Wait, so they have the actual historical figure, Werner von Braun, in this? Okay.
Yeah. So let me go through the cast. So there's and it grows as you get into other volumes, but the original cast is it starts with Oppenheimer. And you realize right out of the gate, it's Oppenheimer, but they say, when he's doing his job interview for the Manhattan Project, they're like, no, your brother has some serious issues. He's like, I'm not my brother. And you find out his brother is his twin brother, who at one point, it diverged. And when Robert Oppenheimer became, like this esteemed scientist, his brother became kind of this mass murdering cannibal who would eat people to obtain their knowledge and wisdom and everything. And so at one point you realize, and again, sort of a spoiler, but this happens so early on, I don't feel bad saying this, he eats his brother. And basically, Robert Oppenheimer in this world is really Jonathan Oppenheimer, who ate his brother, assumed his intelligence, and has this complete psychotic snap. And so when you see him thinking, it's the man drawn there looking at you. It's Oppenheimer, but then like there's 25 other Oppenheimers behind him, kind of ghost versions of him, and they're all different personalities trying to give him advice and things. So you realize how crazy he is right out of the gate. You also meet Einstein, but it's not at all the Einstein you would want to know. You're like, what is wrong with this guy? And again, early on, you realize it's an Einstein. So our Einstein built this portal that can take you to other worlds and dimensions. And he meets a dark dimension version of himself who right out of the gate kills him and assumes his place here on Earth. So it's dark dimension Einstein. And he's like, he's not sinister yet, but you can tell like he's got some kind of like weird agenda that doesn't line up with anybody else's. FDR right out of the gate is there, but pretty early on he dies, in real life he dies, and they turn him into an AI. So you've got FDR, the AI there.
I love this because one of my first questions as you were describing it initially, I was like, okay, I'm going to ask Taylor, what is batshit about it?
Oh, we haven't even gotten to that yet. This is just the cast.
This is batshit.
Oh, yeah. You've got Richard Feynman, who's actually the only normal person in this whole thing. He's kind of like the wide-eyed youth who's part of their team. He's like the plucky young sidekick, so he perfectly acknowledges that a lot of the stuff they're doing is just crazy and just completely batshit and evil. But he's sort of the one who's not, he's the actual one who's trying to be part of the team and doesn't have his own weird side agenda that he's trying to pursue. There's a general who's just kind of a generic U.S. general who's running the whole thing, and he's the more power he can amass for himself without any authority, the better off he is. And then my favorite character, and again, this is the early cast, they keep adding on to it, but my favorite character is Truman. So when FDR dies, Truman is elected, the VP is elected president, and the first shot you see of Truman is at the Washington Masonic Lodge in DC, which is a real place, by the way. It's right by one of their subway lines. And he's in there and he's got like the headdress on, and it's like the craziest like sex orgy you've ever seen. And Truman's right at the heart of it, and he's like smearing blood over everything. You're like, oh God. And he gets the call like, you've been elected. And then every shot you see of Truman after that, he's in like the Oval Office, basically still wearing the headdress, still wearing the Masonic robes, just utterly just crazy. Everything he does is just like the absolute, like every conspiracy theorist like wet dream is like how they portray Truman in this entire thing. At some point later on, kind of spoilers, but not really, like they show him in the he actually depicts a meeting of the Illuminati, and so Truman's there and he's got his headdress on. It's just so completely batshit crazy in terms of how they portray. Every time he shows up, I laugh because it's so fun.
So at this point where it's getting pretty batshit, did the art like fit the story a little bit better in your mind?
Yeah, it kind of does. It kind of settles in, and you're like, yeah. I mean, they could have drawn this any way they wanted to, and it still would have worked. But like the art, what was originally a problem for me is really not anymore. It's like, and I want to make that clear because Nick Patera does a great job. What he does is very consistent. It just was not my particular cup of tea at first, but I've grown to really appreciate it. So
Gotcha.
It's not, and the way they depict scenes, and I can only imagine Nick Patera getting the scripts from Hickman and just going, oh my God, like how am I going to draw this? Like, it's just like, for example, like Werner von Braun, when you meet him, he's got a gigantic android, like super arm. And then like later on, he gets injured again. So they keep like grafting on robot parts onto it. And like, you meet like the Soviet, like eventually when you meet the Soviet side of the equation, like Star City, like the main Soviet general is just a brain, like a brain in a vat of fluid and like a giant android body, so it's like, it's so batshit crazy, and it just gets, and they keep adding people to it. One thing to note is that by this point, Nikola Tesla is already dead in our timeline and in theirs too. Because that was my big question. Oh, is Tesla alive? Because I'm like, he would surely be part of this. No, but I have no doubt that at some point they're going to try to like resurrect the android ghost body of Tesla to like do something. Like it wouldn't be out of the ordinary at all in this story. So
is the story still running?
That's a great question. I know they're up to like volume 6 or 7, so it very well.
Okay. Wow.
Hickman, as we've discussed, has no shortage of projects he's working on. I don't know how the hell he finds the time, but
yeah, exactly.
To give you a sense of kind of just some of the plot, there's not an arc proper. I mean, they set up all these little, like, for example, Einstein's got an agenda. He's trying to use this gate he built for something, you don't know what. So that's kind of like a slow boil in the background. Oppenheimer's got something going on. You don't quite know what, because he's so crazy. So that's a slow boil in the background. And in the meantime, kind of the main thread is just the evolution of the Manhattan projects. They eventually team up with the Soviets. They show Los Alamos, the research facility there, that becomes something. And at some point, early on too, that you just realize their whole goal of this is just for them to become powerful, like a powerful science cabal, and just rule the universe. So they're continuously stretching out. They show at one point an alien visitation that you realize that, Roswell and the Russian, I forget what the Russian equivalent of Roswell is called. It's got some name too, but it's just as well known. You realize that those were just flukes of the same visitation that happens like every month on the clock. And they go to meet the latest incarnation. You realize that the Greys, the Roswell Greys that we had been meeting this entire time, at some point they had been taken over by another alien race. And so that alien race decided to visit us anyway. They're like, hey, we know the Greys have been visiting you, but we're going to take their place. And then that just launches an entire other absurd, like quest into like killing these guys. It's so nuts. And like, I think I wish I had known this earlier, because I think when I first flirted with reading this, my thought was, oh, this is like a really fun what if, like what if Einstein was able to develop some, it goes so far beyond that into just the utter lunacy of just Dan Hickman's fever dream. Like it is like he was on Robitussin, 3 nights in a row and just cranked this out. And it's just purely that crazy fun, science, completely conspiratorial alt science fiction story.
Oh my God. This is so up my alley. I can't believe I
know. I figured it would be. And it's such a fast read. Like, you don't want to, unlike the Black Monday Murders, where like, every page you're like, wow. And you want to weigh the implications of what you just read and go, wow, like what if this is real? Like Black Monday Murders is conspiracy with a very, very real sort of backbone, right? This is the absolute extreme of conspiracy with no realistic background whatsoever. It's just like at one point they bring Kennedy into it, and it's just like, oh God, like this, it kind of makes logical sense, kind of, but you're like, there's no way that you can read this and think, oh, this could have been going on in the, in our world. Like no chance of that whatsoever. It's just really just crazy fun, pulpy kind of comic stuff. So yeah, it's really, without spoiling too much more, that's really, one thing I did want to mention, I have my notes here. Mention the Citizen Jack thing, mention that. Oh, there is some, Hickman does do that thing where he has like a quote in front of each issue, or in case of the paperback, each chapter, he has like a quote from an actual real person. So like you get a lot of real Feynman quotes that he actually said, or a lot of Oppenheimer quotes that he actually said. And that kind of tees up a thematic portion of that chapter. So at one point, von Braun, you think that he's doing what he's doing out of loyalty towards the Reich, and you realize, oh no, he's doing it out of loyalty towards science. Like he wants his ultimate purpose is to just is to bring humanity to the absolute pinnacle of science. Like he wants to go into the stars and see, and he'll do whatever he can to get there. So he operates like a mob boss, but his end is to elevate science at all costs. And so the quote at the beginning of that chapter is a von Braun quote that he actually said that kind of tees that up really nicely. So there's little, those kind of trademark Hickman things that he still does today, were very present then too, but it's definitely his loopier series, and not in a bad way. That's not to diminish it at all.
It looks like, so we know like Black Monday Murders is still running, correct?
Oh yeah.
And this one, it does look like that volume 6 came out in 2016. So whether I can't tell from the image description if that's the natural conclusion or not.
I mean, maybe they went on a pause too. Who knows? He could have.
Right, exactly.
Let's know too for our listeners. Hickman's East of West and Transhuman, that's the title, have been picked up by Amazon. So if those are successful, I could easily see this being adapted as like the most insane TV series of all time. But it would be so much fun to watch because you could just easily have these you could almost have you could cast anybody as Einstein because he's not he doesn't even really look like the Einstein we know. He doesn't carry himself that way. He's kind of a caricature of what Einstein would be. Nothing in this series is really modeled. I mean, loosely visually, but that's it. That's where it stops. And then he kind of just plays with these toys however he wants.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, that's Black Monday Murders. Jonathan Hickman, Nick Patera, Image Comics, always a good choice. And
go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead. I was just gonna say, grab it if you've had reservations, like I have. Take a chance, dive in. At least start with volume 1. If you don't like it after that, you'll know. But it's very easy to just keep going after that first volume.
You had mentioned that you got it on Comixology. Is that because you were doing the unlimited Comixology trial? Or
yeah, and actually
really cheap.
I'm probably going to renew it for another month at least because I want to finish out what they've got there.
Very cool.
And I'm probably, this is going to sound terrible to say. It's one of those books where if I owned it in trade paperback, I don't really need to. I think the digital, the panels are set up to be very digital friendly. So you're not, it's actually better for the story for you to kind of go panel by panel through the Kindle or Comixology view, the way it does that. And honestly, too, it's I don't want to say this because I don't want people to think that it's disposable, but the pulpy kind of nature of it does fit really well. It's not, if you really like it, obviously grab it, put it on your shelf, but it's not something that I feel bad about not having physically.
Right. Well, that digital or print question is always good to ask, especially with Image titles. I was not aware of how well their guided view worked or if it worked at all. I have some older books that don't have guided view, and it's frustrating to do that pinch and zoom kind of thing.
Yeah, it really makes a huge difference. There's a couple, every once in a great while, I'll find it a very obscure indie title that isn't on Comixology but is on Kindle. Yeah. And then I have to do that pinch and zoom thing.
Oh yeah. That's the difference. You're right. That's what's been it when I've bought something as a Kindle comic.
Yeah.
And I would actually say the same thing about the Unworthy Thor. I mean, I have it in print because it was one of those where, I just the week that it came out in trade paperback, I wasn't looking for it, but I picked it up. And, but I think as a digital version, it would be totally fine. It's just such an enjoyable story. I have some of the Jane Foster Thors digitally, and I think I have a couple in print, maybe not. But I've gone back and forth. I know I've had single issues in print, and it's, I would say, if you're at all interested in Unworthy Thor, check it out on Comixology as well.
Yeah, Comixology, I didn't think I would get into it as much as I did because especially with comics, I'm still one of those people that if I purchase it outright, I feel a greater attachment to it, and I'm willing to give it a deeper dive. Yeah. And I was worried that Comixology would kind of make it feel cheaper, but it honestly, treat it just like the local library. They even say borrow this book, that's their terminology they use. And it does feel like, hey, I'm borrowing, and just like I would borrow a book from, I've borrowed comics from the library all the time, and which is great because it gives you a taste of it. And then there's been at least a couple titles I've done that with the library, at least not yet with Comixology, that I bought anyway. Yeah. And so I feel like it's just another discovery mechanism, and it doesn't diminish the experience. It gives you the chance to pick up titles like this that you may have been on the fence about, and
exactly
give them another chance.
I feel like you get a broader experience that way. Yeah. I mean, at least I don't have the unlimited subscription yet, but I went nuts during that 99-cent sale. And, I've read a couple of those that I probably won't talk about on our show, but I just wanted to read them. And it was okay, well, cool. I've read that trade. Now I know, how that went.
And you just feel because I've been hearing about, let's stick with the Manhattan Projects. Every time I walk into a shop and people are like, oh, you like Hickman, you'll love this. And I've always been like, I don't know. And so for as much as I do love Hickman, it's just always been a question mark. So I feel like I'm a completist now. His body of work now, especially in the end, I think I've read everything. Yeah, I have. I've read every single indie thing he's done. So I feel like that's if you're a true reader, if you're a true fan of some of these writers and artists, it just gives you another outlet. And then again, if you really appreciate that work, go buy it, put it on your shelf.
Yeah, exactly. Well, run out and buy some things at your local comic book shop for sure. If you missed it, which you probably did because we didn't announce it, Free Comic Book Day was last week. So
yeah,
we really screwed that up and didn't do anything in conjunction with that.
Well,
but it was also Infinity War week, so who could keep up? I forgot to tell you just a dumb story about Free Comic Book Day. I went to my comic book shop on Free Comic Book Day, got out of my car, and was like, wow, I don't know why, but my pockets feel really light today because I had left my wallet at home, was unable, and I felt so guilty. Like, I don't want to just go in and pick up the free comics and then leave. Like I would ordinarily do some shopping here. And I did go in and sort of, check things out, but I didn't take any free comics.
Oh, shucks.
Shucks. I hope
part of Free Comic Book Day is just to get people in the shops. I feel like we're regulars. Like, as much as I appreciate that promotional strategy, I for us, like every week is kind of like Free Comic Book Day. You walk and you find something cool, or there's some cool discount or something. So I kind of want to keep that spirit going all year long.
Yeah. Totally. Go check it out. Where can people find this show when they are not to listen to on their drive to the comic book shop?
That's right. You can find us on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, Pocketcasts, which is now owned by NPR, which is interesting. And wherever podcasts are found, you can also find us online, findusthere.org. Soon there will be a Coffee and Comics website too that we're working on. Look for that. And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram. I am by Taylor Trask.
And I am at HeyToddA on Twitter and Instagram. So we will catch you next week for another Coffee and Comics.